Alright, so what's up everybody? I'm going to talk about deploying in Warzone. I wanted to know some more information about it. I wanted to know if there was a best method to deploying deploying in Warzone, getting to the ground as fast as it was. Is there a way I can get to the ground faster? Is there a certain way I have to deploy? There was just a lot of questions I had, and I wanted to have them answered. So some of the things I wanted to know was, hey, how long does it take to get me? How long does it take to get to the ground? Is there the best method to deploying? And then also, hey, how far can I travel from the plane? Like if I deploy straight away, how far can I go without deploying my chute? How far can I go with deploying my chute? Let's say halfway down to the ground. Let's say I cut my chute 150 meters from the ground. How far can I travel? How far can I travel before I have to deploy my chute, before I dig on the ground and go to Gulag? Just some questions and some information I wanted to know. So let's get into it. So I put up some ton of tests. During my test, I kind of developed my parameters of constants. Like when you're doing testing, you've got to have constants if you're going to test one thing. You can't have a bunch of variables. Some of the variables we couldn't really control, as far as like altitude to the flight path of the plane, or the altitude where I was deploying from, the terrain altitude where I was landing and stuff like that. There was just some things you can't control unless I'm going to spend hours and hours testing, trying to always get that same flight path. Also, another thing that I did was, for all the timings, there's an altitude indicator that appears on your HUD to the right of the screen. So once the altitude indicator appeared on your HUD, I started the timer as soon as it appeared, and then all the timings stopped after it disappeared once you hit the ground. And then also my auto deploy was turned on. You can find this in your settings, to meter indicator, whatever you really want to call it. Again, once you deploy out of the plane, it appears on your HUD. And if you don't know what HUD stands for HUD, heads up display. On the altitude meter, there's still some. It just kind of shows you a marker of where your character's at in relation to the ground, and it also gives you a speed, if you will, of how fast your character is moving through the air. Doesn't really give you any indication of how far away from the ground you are. So if you were on a certain spot in the altitude meter, how far away from the ground were you actually? What I did was I deployed my chute, and I just kind of floated down and kind of just marked every location of where I was at. And 50 meter increments, starting from 500 going down by 50 meters, and marking each location on the altitude meter where I was. So here's a graphic of all that. I'll have a link to the actual PNG, or the actual photo, where you can download and save this if you want to, and marked every location. So here that is. But for some other tests that we're going to do in this video, we're not going to be doing them at we're going to do it exactly 450 or 300 meters. Basically what I did is, as you can see here, and what you'll see in game, is the altitude meters got these tick marks on them. There's 25 tick marks total, I guess, if you're counting the top, the very top one at the 500 meter mark. Coming down from the top of the altitude meter, coming down 6 tick marks, so that'll be the 3/4 mark. Coming down 12 ticks will be the half mark, and then coming 18 ticks will be the 1/4 mark for all deployment tests for the video. So something basic that we're going to test, that I tested here, was time to get to the ground. If I jump out of the plane and I deploy straight away and just head straight to the ground, how long is it going to take me? In my testing, I found that it took me about 12 seconds to get from the plane into the ground. So I wanted to know how far I could go and how long it would take me to deploy from the plane as far away as I could without deploying my chute, and letting the auto deploy take care of that. So after I deployed, I just kind of pointed my character at a 45-degree angle, trying to get the most distance and time out of that. And I was able to travel about 400 meters, or about one square. All the squares are about 400 meters. 400 meters square. So I was able to get one square away from the plane from the plane. And it took me about 14 and a half seconds to do that. So the next thing we're going to look at is a best method for deploying in Warzone. There's a couple of different methods out there, and these are really for long distance deployments, not really for one square away. If you're one square away from your drop location, or your point of interest that you want to go to, just deploy out of the plane. If you have your auto deployment enabled, then just go to that location and drop in and just land. It's not really that nothing really kind of too complicated, or nothing that needs to be too complicated for deploying at that distance. These other couple of tests are going to help you, are going to just be some more information for deploying at that longer distance. So what I wanted to know was a best method for deploying. So I wanted to know what was the best, the fastest way to get down, the distance I could travel and cover, or the distance I could cover in this method, and also was it how complicated was it? Like, did I have to really focus on my drop and not pay attention to any enemies flying around me, or deploying, maybe looking for enemies that might be deploying the same location as me, or even just picking out like what building was I going to drop at? So I kind of just did a test of, okay, hey, if I were to deploy out of the plane, free fall for half the altitude meter, and then deploy my chute at that halfway mark, and still and try to cover as much distance as I could, how far could I travel? So I did just that. Free fell and then deployed, and I was able to travel about 1,200 meters from my drop location. Then for the second test, I did the exact opposite. I deployed my chute as soon as I got out of the plane. I started to travel until I got to halfway down the altitude meter, and then I cut my chute and still try to travel at that 45-degree angle to cover as much distance as I could, and then deploying my chute right before I hit the ground. One test, I opened my chute once. The other test, I opened it twice. So is deploying that chute cutting into my time as far as me getting to the ground? Deploying my chute as soon as I got out of the plane, and then when I got to halfway down the altitude meter, cutting my chute and then deploying before I hit the ground, I was able to cover about 1,200 meters again. Okay, so I traveled the same distance. Now, what was the time like? For the first test of opening so the first test of free falling and then opening my chute halfway down and then opening my chute, I was able to travel 56 seconds, or the travel time was 56 seconds. And then for the opening the chute, as soon as I got opening the chute, free falling, and then opening before I got to the ground, it took me about 59 seconds. So 3-second difference. It's not a lot to say, hey, that was a little bit faster. Okay, I opened my chute once, so maybe there's a little bit there. That time difference could also have to do with the terrain I landed at. One place I landed in farmland, which is a little bit higher than where the other place I landed, which was quarry. So that could be a little bit of a factor too. Nothing I want to say is like definitive there. There's another deployment method that I wanted to try out, and that was opening and closing my chute as fast as I could. And okay, so I'm doing that. I don't know how many times I opened my chute. I had to open it over 10 times. So doing that, did the same thing. I was able to travel 1,200 meters, so it was in the distance of the other two tests. But then it came to the time, which I was kind of surprised about, which it took me 52 seconds to get from the plane to the ground. Again, I think that difference it's 4 seconds faster than just deploying my chute once. But again, I think that's more to do with the terrain and everything. I wouldn't say it's a definitive point, hey, that's the best method to do it. I don't think there really is a best method to getting to the ground in Warzone. I think it's just, hey, what's the distance you want to, where do you want to go? How far is that away? And do I need to have my chute open? If you're 1 square away from your target location, don't open your chute. Just go to that location and drop down. So as far as the best method to deploy in Warzone, you don't really want to wait until you're perpendicular from your target. From the flight path, you kind of want to do it at an angle. So let's say you want to deploy somewhere on the flight path, but let's say or somewhere exactly on the flight path. You want to deploy 1 square before that plane gets to before you and the plane get to that location. So you're going to want to deploy from that plane, go straight down to that target, and by the time that you hit the ground, by the time somebody else deploys right over that location, you're already going to be halfway, if not more, to the ground and on that loot and stuff. So that's kind of one. Even if it's not quite 1 square away from the plane's flight path, if it's a little bit closer, again, you're kind of want to judge that distance and deploy before you get to that area. I hope that kind of makes sense. Some other things I wanted to test was, hey, if I deploy it, like I'm trying to stretch it out, okay, I'm trying to get it to this location way out there, and I'm not really sure. Let's say it's more than 4 squares away. Let's say I deploy early, and then I want to kind of recover from that. Let's say I'm getting up close to my target, and I'm almost right on top of it. Let's say I'm 400 meters square. Let's say I'm 400 meters away, and or let's say I'm 300 meters away and I'm still halfway up the altitude meter. So what I tested was, okay, if I were to deploy, so what I was wanting to know was, okay, if I free fell from a certain mark on my altitude meter, what's the distance I could travel? If I was pointing my character at a 45-degree angle, what was the distance I could travel to get to that location? And So I did these for 3/4, half, and quarter on the altitude meter. And for 3/4 of the way, so me deploying my chute as soon as I deployed, waiting until I get to that 3/4 mark, and then cutting my chute and trying to get the furthest I could away from that that target, that location. For 3/4 of the height, I was able to get go out to, again, 400 meters. So it didn't really matter if I was deploying from the plane or from that height. I was able to deploy 400 meters away, and it took about 13 seconds. So halfway down the altitude meter, I was able to travel 300 meters, and it took me 10 seconds to do that. And then finally, a quarter from the altitude meter, I was able to travel 130 to 150 meters, and it took about 7.5 seconds to go down that distance. So that was some of the information that I found while doing my testing and trying to find that best method to deploy in Warzone. I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you did, I'd appreciate it if you liked the video and also subscribe to the channel. I'm be working on some more Call of Duty videos, whether that's weapon reviews or just some other tidbits of information for Warzone or even multiplayer. If there's something else you want to know, please leave a comment in the comment section saying, hey, something that you have a question about that you want me to test and kind of look into deeper into. Please feel free to leave that in the comments. I do stream every Monday, Wednesday, and Saturday over on Facebook. You can find me there at Manic Titan. Again, I appreciate you watching the video, and I hope to see you next time.